What is up, book nerds? I'm Rachel Bateman. In today's video, I'll be doing the Authortube Work in Progress tag. I just barely did the Authortube newbie tag like a month ago, and I prefer not to do tag videos too close together, but I've been sick for 2 weeks and coming up with new content's been a little rough. On top of that, I did just start a new project, and I am doing a work in progress challenge on Instagram this month, so it seemed like the perfect time to do this tag. I'm not actually sure who started this tag, who did the original video. If you know, let me know in the comments and I'll go ahead and link their information down below. I've been seeing this one floating around for a long time and it just seemed like a bit of fun. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. There are 10 questions about my work in progress. Number 1 is, what is the working title of your book? First off, my current project is not actually a book. I am writing a screenplay. March is the 0 Draft 30 challenge, which is very much like NaNoWriMo for screenplays. Back in the day, NaNoWriMo ran Script Frenzy with the idea that you write an entire screenplay in a month. When that ended, a man named Scott Myers started 0 Draft 30 with the same objective. So the project I am working on for 0 Draft 30 is called Lake Blaine. Let's see if I can get that without a glare. I am a super nerd, so like my planning and my outlining goes in little covered notebooks that I make. Lake Blaine, I actually started writing it as a novel for NaNoWriMo 2018. I was in a huge funk during that period, so this is the first NaNoWriMo since I started doing it that I did not finish. I got partway through the month and just quit. I kept going to the write-ins to support my other Rymos, but I didn't keep writing. I still love the story though, and it lends itself to a screenplay really well. So while I will go back someday and write the novel and finish it, I am for now focusing on the screenplay because it's just a lot of fun. I've been wanting to go back and write another screenplay for a long time now, and this seems like the perfect project to do that with. Question 2. Where did the idea for this project come from? Summer 2018, I was at Sealy Lake. My family goes for a week every July, and I love when I go places getting the real estate guides for the area and just flipping through and looking at the houses for sale and daydreaming a little bit. You know, if I just happen to fall upon a huge boodle of money, what lake house would I buy? Just having a good time. And as I was flipping through, there was this house on the upper right corner of a page. It's a house on Lake Blaine in Kalispell, Montana. I actually have the clipping. Let's see if I can get my camera to focus on it. There we go. It really, something about it struck me. I looked at this house and I say, wow, this is a big house. I can tell it's gorgeous. And I don't know if it's just the picture that they used or if it was actually a little bit foggy that day, but there's almost like a haze, old-time quality to this picture. And then there's a picture of the lake and there's a fog on the lake too. And I remember looking at this and thinking, this is a gorgeous house and I'm sure it's really nice, but these pictures make it look like a horror movie is taking place here. And I don't know that this was the best choice for a real estate guide, but it has this very eerie vibe. I actually posted a picture of that little cutout from the real estate guide on my Instagram a while back when I was talking about this project, and I got a direct message, a private message on Instagram from a man saying, hey, my family bought that house about a year ago. I'd love to read this. And I was like, great. That's really cool. I hope you love your house, and I'm really sorry I turned it into a den of murder. Later that night, or maybe the next night, I went out paddleboarding by myself. It was right at sunset, starting to get dark, and I'm out on my board, earbuds in, listening to an audiobook, and I'm just like paddling along, going to the far end of the lake where I turn around and come back, and I think I hear a noise. So I take my earbud out and I listen and I listen and I listen, and there's nothing. So I put it back in and I keep paddling. And about a minute later, I hear something again. So I take my earbud back out, and this happens 2 or 3 times. And before too long, I'm starting thinking there's not a horror movie happening at this house on Lake Blaine. Like, I am in a horror movie right now. Like, it's happening on this lake, and I'm out here like an idiot by myself on a paddleboard with nothing to protect me, and overactive imagination. It just snowballed from there. Long story short, I paddled back to my cabin. I was fine. There was nothing happening, obviously, but it spurred the idea for this project. Question 3, what genre does your project fall under? Lake Blaine is a slasher, like straight up slasher horror. It is full of tropes and full of blood and full of fun. I am working really hard to make it a more character-driven slasher, which is almost an oxymoron in the genre anymore, but there are some very good slashers that are more about the characters than the kills. Now, kill scenes are very important in slashers, obviously, but I feel like so much of the genre has become so focused on the most creative way to kill a character and the goriest way and the most unexpected way that writers are forgetting to make actual characters before they kill them. And this is something that's been happening for most of the time that slashers have been around, starting really back in 1980 with Friday the 13th, when we finally had the special effects to show the graphic kill scenes instead of just having everything kind of alluded to or glazed over. They really focused in on the blood and gore for the first time in Friday the 13th, and it has built since then. But every once in a while you get this gem of a slasher that focuses on the characters first, so you have a connection to those characters and you actually care when they're killed instead of just like, yay, this was an exciting kill. I've gone to many slashers where people cheered for each death because they don't care at all about the characters. All they care about is seeing the blood and gore. And there is a place for that, and it's a lot of fun. But I love those movies that focus more on the characters. The Screams. Scream is my favorite. I've talked about this before. But you get to know the characters, you get to know their backstory and their relationships, and you care about the characters. So when Randy is killed, sorry, spoiler alert, but it was 20 years ago, you get upset about it. And that's what I want to do with this screenplay. It's a little slower paced at the beginning than many of the slashers coming out that just kill without building characters. And I am loving that. The problem though is that I am loving my characters, so killing them off is a little rough sometimes. Question 4, which actors would you choose to play in the movie? I actually don't have a visual idea for most of the characters in this screenplay, partly because that's just not really how I work. And in a screenplay, you don't explicitly describe the characters. You don't describe what they look like. That is for the director to choose. That is for the costume department to choose. That is for so many other people to decide. As the writer, unless there is something that is crucial to the actual story, you don't describe your characters. That said, I do have a couple actors in mind. Primarily for my main character, Mac, I've always had Bailee Madison in mind. There's a really simple reason for that, and that's that when we optioned Someone Else's Summer for film, Bailee Madison attached herself to play Anna, my main character, and so when I started thinking about this idea for Lake Blaine, she was kind of already on my mind. I had gone and seen Strangers Pray at Night and seen her in a horror movie, and she's just kind of been who's been on my mind the whole time. So when I write her character, I do visualize Bailee Madison there. And the other one that I have an idea for and a visual for, and this actually came from when I was writing the novel version and I did describe the character, is there's a character named Jagger who is Mac's best friend's brother, and I have pictured Timothée Chalamet as that character. And actually more recently I've also pictured Tyler Mowry. If you don't know who Tyler is, to my knowledge he's not actually an actor at all. He is a screenwriter and he has a very informative YouTube channel. For those of you who have been asking me to do screenwriting videos and information about that, I am going to link Tyler down below because his channel is very motivating, very inspiring, and very informational. He also has a paid screenwriting course. I have not taken it at this point. I likely will at some point, so I can't tell you what that is like, but I do know his YouTube channel is fantastic. Tyler, I don't know if you act, but you know, if you decide you want to, I have a spot in a horror movie for you. Question 5. What is your one sentence synopsis or logline? My logline for Lake Blaine is very simple. It is: 2 years after horrific tragedy occurred there, a group of friends goes back to the lake house for one last visit, only to find that the past won't stay buried. Almost cliche for a slasher, but let's be honest, slashers are very strong with the tropes. They border on cliche, almost all of them. And that's kind of what I'm going for. I'm just having a lot of fun with this and leaning into those tropes, subverting some of them, and just really playing with it. So that logline just lends to that very easily. Question 6, will you be self-published or traditionally published? Not really either. This isn't a book, for one. And for 2, I am just writing this for fun for now. Maybe when I get done, I'll decide I want to try to pitch it. The reality is selling a screenplay is actually a lot harder than selling a book. But I'm not looking toward really doing anything with this screenplay at this point. I'm going to write it. I will go back and finish the novel version and possibly look to publication for that, just depending on how I feel. But for right now, this project is just for me. I would be lying if I said I've never considered what it would be like to actually make this into a movie, and I've considered the big daydreams of selling it to a studio and having them make it in the big theater production, all the way down to how fun it would be to independently produce this on a near zero budget. Just get some people together, spend some time, and make a fun movie. Whether I will try to do either one of those is something for the future. I'm not even thinking about it at this point. I'm just having fun. Question 7, how long did it take you to write the first draft? I am not done with the first draft yet because I just started it 5 days ago. I will write the whole thing during the month of March. I am confident in my ability to do that. It's going along at a nice pace, and I have it planned out very well. For a screenplay, especially on a shorter type of film like a horror where you're looking at 90 pages for the screenplay, doing that in a month for your first draft is really easily doable. So that's what I am doing. Question 8, what other stories would you compare this to? My top one is Scream. I adore Scream. I adore Kevin Williamson's writing, not just in Scream. I really enjoyed the first couple seasons and the end of Dawson's Creek. I enjoy all of Dawson's Creek, but Kevin Williamson didn't write all of it, and you could really feel and hear when he is writing because he has a very distinct style and voice. So Scream is way up there. As far as books, There's Someone in Your House by Stephanie Perkins is the first one I'd compare it to. I would love to see more books like that, more non-supernatural, non-paranormal horror. Straight up slasher horror in book form. I read one recently, and I'm spacing on who wrote it. I will look it up and link it down below. It's called Night Shoot. It was a ton of fun. I would like to see more like that. As far as movies, there are a ton of slashers out there. I like Scream. It works great for this. Final Girls is great for this. And it's kind of funny that those are the two I pull first because those are both actually light parodies or satire. Scream more satire, Final Girls more parody. It doesn't matter because mine is neither satire nor parody. It is a straight slasher, but the vibe and the feel with the characters is more like Scream and Final Girls. Question 9, who or what inspired you to write this story? I kind of went over that a lot with question 2, where did the idea come from? I took the inspiration heavily from that picture of that house. It's why it is called Lake Blaine. That is where the house is. Maybe not the most creative, but it kind of felt right, so I went with it. It also was just inspired by my love of slasher films. I adore them. I watch them all the time. I remember distinctly the first time I watched Scream. It came out when I was 13 years old. We watched it in the upstairs of our house. My parents were gone and my older sister was next door babysitting. So me, my younger stepsister, who's just like 8 months younger than me, and our neighbor, who is a couple years younger than us, we're all cuddled in watching the movie by ourselves. We get just to the end of that first scene where Drew Barrymore dies, and it's like this huge shock because the big star of the movie's gone in 15 minutes, and our phone rings. This was 1997 when it came out. You know, everyone still had landlines. We didn't have cell phones. The ring sounded just like the ring on the screen. We had just seen this horrible thing go down, and we peed ourselves. We freaked out. And we did eventually answer. It was my sister calling from next door. Not a big deal. But I remember that distinctly. I remember the feeling of being up there with those other two girls and just terrified and loving that we are terrified. And that's really, I had seen scary movies before that. I had seen scary movies way too young to have seen scary movies. But that was what really solidified my love, not just for horror, but for slashers. And since then, I've watched as many as I can, and I rewatch them, and I read the screenplays, and I just really love them. I know that there's a lot to make fun of and that they're not always done well and they can be very cliche and not have a lot of plot, but when they are done well and done right, they are some of the most pure, amazing horror you can watch. And so really that's what's inspired this, is just my lifelong love of the genre. Question 10, what else about your story might pique your readers, or in this case viewers, interest? I don't really know that it'll pique any interest, but I'm having so much fun with this. Right now, my character names are kind of ridiculous, but I'm just leaning into it and rolling with it. My two main female characters, their moms were best friends, and they still are best friends, and so they've grown up together. Their moms were kind of like late to the party classic rock groupies, wanting to follow the bands and do the groupie scene after that was really a big thing. So when they started having kids at the same time, they really, really rolled with that. So my two main characters are named Lennon and McCartney. Lennon has an older brother named Jagger. McCartney has a younger sister named Marley. I don't know if all that'll stay. It's a little bit cheesy, but I'm just having fun with it and just playing off that classic rock thing. The thing that will probably pique the most interest is the inspired by true events angle to this story. Now here's the fun thing about horror movies that are inspired by true events. When you film a movie and you say, this is a true story, you kind of have to stay to the story. When you film a movie saying, based on real events, you kind of have to stick with the real events. But when you film a movie and say inspired by true events, all you really need is like that flash of inspiration, and then you could just roll with it. You know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was inspired by real events. That real event was Ed Gein, who lived in Wisconsin and killed some people. He was also a weirdo. There's really no nice way to put it, and you know, he was a serial killer, so you really don't have to put it nicely, but he would wear the skin of his victims and wear women's clothing. That is the true inspiration for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We have Leatherface, who wears the faces of his victims. Depending on the version you watch, if you watch the original Tobe Hooper version versus some of the remakes, there are extended backstory reasons why he does that, but that is what was inspired by the true events. There was no man in Texas who killed people with a chainsaw. The chainsaw was used because back when he was writing the movie in the early 70s, Tobe Hooper was in a home improvement store and he was looking at these chainsaws and he thought to himself, hey, that would be a really effective way to make your way through a crowd of people. And it rolled from there, and suddenly we have this man who uses the chainsaw as his murder weapon. And that has been used repeatedly in horror films from then on out. But it wasn't inspired by someone who actually killed anyone with a chainsaw. It was inspired by something that happened way, way in a different area. The only confirmed Ed Gein killings were done with a gun. There is speculation about a bunch of other victims, but really the true story inspiration is nothing like the movie. But because they did take inspiration from real life, they could really lean into that and people get more excited and they get more interested. That said, there is something that happened at Seeley Lake well before I was born that my aunts experienced, and they've told us the story for our entire lives. And I actually have totally co-opted their story, and I put it in at the beginning of Lake Blaine as the moms telling this story as if it had happened to them when they were teenagers to try to kind of freak their teenagers out. The story goes, when my aunts and their friends were younger, and I honestly, in all the times I've heard the story, don't know if my stepdad was there for this. I should ask him. But when my aunts and their friends were younger, when they were teenagers, maybe early 20s, they were sitting around the fire pit down at the beach by the water at Seeley Lake, and there was a noise, and this man comes out of the lake. They're a little freaked out, obviously. They back themselves up, and they actually go into a cabin, screened-in porch so they could watch. And this man comes, and he stands in their fire in his underwear, and starts calling out for the fair maiden of the sea. My Aunt Susan is blonde. She's the only fair one there. So of course everyone's like, oh, Susie, he's talking about you, go. And what it came down to is this man had been at some kind of church camp and had like a complete mental break. They found him. I believe he probably got some kind of treatment. I don't know the details. And for all I know, I told that story totally wrong. Though as many times as I've heard it, I'm hoping I'm doing it justice. But that, I have totally held on to that, put it in my story, and that thread goes through the rest of the screenplay. This man in the fire and what happened when the moms were young and the suspicion and speculation about what's happening now at this lake. And so while most of the story has just completely come out of my head, there is some real life inspiration, and people seem to love that when it comes to horror movies. So I am really just playing with that and hyping that up, at least in my own mind. So that was the Authortube work in progress tag. I had a blast telling you all about my new project. I am having so much fun with this. It is so completely different from anything I've written before, but something that I've really wanted to write for a long, long time and just haven't. I actually started writing screenplays, I've mentioned this before I wrote novels, so going back to screenplays is great. and switching over to that and just writing a screenplay now that I know so much more about creating a world and creating a story and a plot and pacing, all the stuff I've learned over the last several years as a novelist. It's really fun being able to apply that back into a screenplay, and it's a nice challenge to do this in screenplay format when I'm so used to having more exposition and narrative and description. You strip so much away for a screenplay that it is a fun challenge to write it in this format. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up. Go ahead and click subscribe so you don't miss my future videos. I will make more videos about screenwriting. I've had several questions about that, specifically how do I get into screenwriting as a novelist and how is it different from writing a novel. So I will be filming and sharing those videos. So definitely do subscribe so you don't miss anything. Go ahead and click the little bell so you're notified when those go up. Thank you again for watching. I am Rachel Bateman and I will see you next week.